As Ian just said, returning to the town hall is Paul Kotyk. Paul's been on before. He talked about abstinence in January, and he's going to talk to us about a very interesting topic, which is the art and science of the explosions associated with fireworks. Right. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Jacques. I am going to share my screen for a moment. Let me know if you're able to see it, and I'll continue. How's that look?
Yep, brilliant.
Yeah.
All righty. So Ian gave you a little rundown of Francis Scott Key and his famous poem, including the rocket's red glare. And I think I take a little bit of exception with that. So I'm going to tell you why. But first, I'll just note that as we head into the weekend, it's very likely that while you're blaring Hendrix or Springsteen, or even good old-fashioned Key, your 4th of July celebrations will in some way, shape, or form include the firework. So I thought it would be a good idea to take, this dazzling, fun national event and turn it into more of a history lesson. So in 9th century AD, during the Tang Dynasty in China, a Tao alchemist who was supposedly attempting to create an elixir of immortality mixed together sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate, more commonly known as saltpeter. Now, surprisingly, while being heated, this mixture of immortality did not last forever. Instead, when exposed to high temperatures, the mixture itself caught fire rather quickly, and it completely burned itself up. Now, had this alchemist ever seen an equation like this, he would have understood that what he had produced was a sustained combustion, the result of two fuel sources, the sulfur and the carbon from the charcoal, mixed with an oxidizer, which is the potassium nitrate. And that's all been catalyzed by an intense heat. This particular alchemist would also have understood that what he had produced, albeit in an unoptimized form at the time, is more commonly known today as gunpowder. Now, gunpowder, also known as black powder, is the earliest known chemical explosive. And it's actually classified as a low explosive. This is because of its relatively slow decomposition rate and its low brisance. What that ends up meaning is that gunpowder does not actually detonate, but rather it deflagrates. It burns very quickly. This quick burning, this property gives gunpowder an advantage as a propellant, because instead of exploding rapidly and potentially damaging its container, it can maintain its burn, which, if oriented in a single direction, can provide a focused thrust. But since gunpowder contains its own oxidizer, that potassium nitrate from before, it can actually continue to burn in a sealed container on its own, which increases pressure inside that container until the container explodes. So containers like this would include bombs, grenades, shells, or in the case of our ancient Chinese friends, the earliest form of firework. So to create explosions during religious festivals, the Chinese filled bamboo tubes with this newly discovered mixture and tossed them into fires. Now, it's possible that some of the bamboo tubes failed to explode due to perforations, which allowed pressure to escape, focused thrust to be created, and a bamboo container propelling out of the fire due to its escaping gases. Also, the sparks produced by the burning gunpowder inside the bamboo would have been a pretty sight to behold. So, the Chinese began experimenting with the gunpowder-filled tubes. At some point, they attached the tubes to arrows and launched them with bows. Soon after, they discovered that the gunpowder tubes could launch themselves just by the power produced from the escaping gas, and thus a true rocket was born. And by the 1200s, Chinese armies were using crude forms of rockets to repel Mongolian invaders. And these Mongols, likely attempting to produce their own rockets, are probably the ones responsible for spreading that technology into Europe. Now, Experimentation with gunpowder in Europe led to obvious things like muskets and cannons. But as the technology spread from the 13th century onward, the Europeans also experimented with rockets. Some notable developments along the way included improved forms of gunpowder, so getting the right ratio of oxidizer to fuel sources, which then increased rocket ranges. It made muskets more reliable, and tube launch mechanisms, which kind of improved the accuracy. These things were still fairly inaccurate, up until the modern day. But along with European experimentation geared toward weaponry, there was a continued development for fireworks from an entertainment standpoint, from a spectacle standpoint. So if you were a European in the 1600s and you were attending a celebration for a religious event, for a royal event, for a military victory, you yourself could witness the spectacle of aerial fireworks made possible by rockets. And according to a Smithsonian historical account, fireworks events were run by fire masters, which probably looked like that, and their assistants, which were called green men. The green men were actually named because of the leaves they wore. The leaves they wore to protect themselves from sparks. They would tell jokes to the crowd while they prepared the celebration. But it wasn't all joking, because being a green man was very dangerous. A lot of them were injured or killed because fireworks in the day were unreliable and malfunctioned. But despite the danger, fireworks continued on in popularity. English royals, in fact, were so competitive with their fireworks displays that the impressive works put on by King James II firemaster earned him a knighthood, actually. So the fireworks were popular in England, and the popularity from these English displays spread from England to its colonies. And because it spread to the colonies, our forefathers actually used fireworks to celebrate momentous occasions. Try and think of a momentous occasion that we celebrate with fireworks. On July 2nd, in 1776, John Adams actually wrote a letter to his wife referencing the celebration of their upcoming historic day with bonfires and illuminations. The illuminations actually referred to fireworks launched in celebration of the nation's independence. But if you'll notice, these fireworks displayed in front of our new nation's flag are still orange. So this is why we're going to take a little bit of exception to Key's famous line, "The rocket's red glare." So around 1800, before the War of 1812, 2 decades after the Revolution began, a British colonel by the name of William Congreve began experiments to turn the basic rocket from a pretty inaccurate conveyance for fireworks into a more true weapon of war. Previous to this, rockets used in wars were ineffective because of their meager range of only a few hundred feet, and because their short ranges were combined with unpredictable flight paths. They were actually best used as a sort of firework in order to send signals into the sky. But Colonel Congreve improved the rocket's effectiveness by increasing its size, compacting the gunpowder more tightly into a metal cylinder, and devising a variety of warheads for impact. He also calculated the most effective angle of launch, which he put to be about 50 degrees. So the ship actually that all of these rockets were being fired from had 600 to 700 rockets on board and was a modified gunship that would normally have cannons. Congreve's experimentation actually increased the range of a rocket to up to 3,000 yards, which is a bit more than 1.5 miles. However, even though they were able to travel a lot farther because of better burn, they're still very inaccurate. You can see these rockets have nothing by the way of fins or any sort of flight surface to control them. So during the war, 600 to 700 3.5-inch diameter, 32-pound rockets were fired over the 24-hour assault against Fort McHenry. Each of these rockets carried about 7 pounds of incendiary mixture. But the funny thing is, the ship that was firing the rockets could not actually get close enough to the fort to meaningfully hit it. So the rockets fell short and into the bay. And as for producing this red glare, that still might be a bit of a stretch, even though Key was on board a ship and could actually see them launching off. The rocket's exhaust flames were produced by a type of gunpowder, which we know burns orange. So the red glare, rocket's red glare, is a bit more alliterative than rocket's barely visible orange exhaust. So we'll chalk that up to some poetic license. It wouldn't actually be for another 20 years after the British attack on Fort McHenry and 60 years after the American Revolution that fireworks celebrations would have some sort of color added to the spectacle. And this was because Italian inventors in the 1830s began to add different chemicals to fireworks that burn in different colors. It opened up an entirely new aspect of fireworks display and ushered in more of the modern day fireworks that we enjoy today. Some of the more common color producing salts that were mixed in with fireworks include strontium, which gives it an intense red, barium for green, lithium gives it that pink hue, sodium gives it yellow, copper a rich blue, and calcium is added to intensify the otherwise standard orange burn of the gunpowder. So we now are getting a bit more to where we can enjoy our fireworks today, which means whether you're able to light some fireworks off yourself this weekend, or if you can find yourself viewing a grand fireworks celebration, like hopefully I will later on this weekend in DC, you can actually relish in the fact that you're getting to experience the culmination of over 1,000 years of fireworks tradition, technology, spectacle, and you get color this time, which is more than most of the fireworks enjoyers over the last millennia can say. But do remember, you're not a green man in the 17th century Europe, but fireworks are still explosive and dangerous. So if you are around fireworks or using them, be safe, exercise caution, and otherwise have a happy Independence Day.
Well, thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. That was a great presentation. Yeah, that was an excellent presentation. And thank you, Ian, as well for your presentation on Francis Scott Key. So that was great. I think that, that definitely set the tone for the weekend.